everyone coming in. Right, so we'll get started. So on December the 18th of 1994, 27-year-old Alison Botha had a carefree day that ended in an absolute nightmare that most of us could even never, ever have survived. Alison was born on September the 22nd in 1967 in Port Elizabeth in South Africa. When she was 10 years of age, her parents divorced, and she spent the majority of her childhood living with her mother and her brother. Now, she says that she had a really great childhood. She felt safe, she felt loved. Thank you, G. Her mum did absolutely everything and gave up so much for her and her brother. And she served as head girl at a high school for girls in Port Elizabeth. And when she finished school, she spent time travelling. And she was kind of like the perfect daughter, really. Like she'd never been in any trouble. She left school, she went travelling for 2 years. She came back to Port Elizabeth to be with family and began working as an insurance broker. So she was doing just living such a good life, but not any kind of high risk. Hey, Nicole. We've only just started this. If you just come in, you're just about to, I've just literally said when she was born and we're getting into it now. So she was not living a high risk lifestyle at all. She was literally living pretty much the cookie cutter lifestyle for like how we wish everyone kind of lived, right? Do their school, excel at school, then they kind of go travelling for a bit, settle down in a job, and that's what she'd done. Now, on December the 18th of 1994, Alison spent the day at a beach with her friends, and it's a day whereon Alison invited everyone over to her flat to hang out, have pizza and play games. Now, Alison, being a real girl's girl, a real kind of good person, decided that she didn't want her friends to walk home because it wasn't safe and it was late. So she decided that she wanted to give everyone a lift home. And she was one of those people, hey Danny, she was one of those people like this, you know, regardless, you've been at my house, you've been having pizza with me, it's my responsibility to make sure everyone gets home and safe. So that's what she did. She gave everyone a lift home and she dropped two friends off separately and returned to her apartment just after 3 a.m. in the morning after pretty much a perfect day. Hey Nick. She decided she's dropped her friends home. I know she's gutted, I'm absolutely gutted. She got home, parked in her normal parking spot at 3 a.m. and she decides to walk towards her apartment. Now, as she gets out of her car, she decides that, well, she may as well kill two jobs at once, and she's got all of her laundry that's been at the laundromat, or laundrette, I should say, I'm not American. She's got all her laundry in the back seat in a basket, so she decides to get out of the car, get her laundry, and as she starts to kind of get her laundry out, someone approaches the driver's side of the car. Now, before she even has a moment to react, a man stood in front of her, holding a blade to her throat. He instructs her to get into the passenger seat and says, if you scream or if you move, I will kill you. Get into the passenger side. So Alison's 27, she gets into the car and they begin to drive into the darkness. He says to her, his name's Clinton. Now, straight away, this is a red flag. If somebody kidnaps you and they're giving you their information, they're probably not planning on you surviving. So he tells her his name's Clinton and he goes, I only want to borrow your car for an hour and then I'm going to bring you straight back. And he says, all you have to do is listen to what I tell you and this is all going to go, thank you, Sally, this is all going to be fine. Now, Alison believes him and she goes, okay. And he's making small talk with her. He's asking lots of personal questions. She remembers back that she's just shaking and she's just like, how has this happened? Thank you, Kirsty. Thank you, everyone, for helping with the gift girl. He's making small talk and she is trying to just tell him any information that's kind of very minimal. And she's thinking, I don't want him to know anything about me. Thank you, G. Thank you, Kirsty. Thank you, everyone. He asks if she had a boyfriend. And so she lies and says, my name's Susan and I do have a boyfriend. He's waiting at home. He's going to know I'm missing. Thank you, Lily. Now, we know that this is a lie, but she's just thinking maybe if he thinks somebody is there waiting for me and someone's likely to phone the police, he's going to just take me back sooner. And she's a very smart girl and she's trying to do everything she can to get out of this situation. Thank you, Leanne. Thank you, Jez. Thank you, everyone, so much. Now, she explained that she needs to head back and she's like, why don't you drop me off and I will just not tell anyone, you keep the car. Thank you, Crystal. And she's saying, look, I won't even phone the police. I just want to go home safe. Thank you, Anne. And he says, no, I don't just want the car. I want your company. Hayley. And this is when she starts thinking, like, he said he wanted the car, but now he's not going to let me out of the car. And she starts feeling quite scared, more scared than she has been. Now, he says, I want your company and I want you to come with me to pick up one of my friends. And now she's like, oh my God. Now there's going to be 2 men in the car with her. Now, when Alison later talks about the second man that gets in the car, she describes it like this, thank you. She says, the moment I looked into the second man's eyes, all I saw was pure evil. I knew I probably wasn't going home. I'll show you a picture of the 2 men, but she says the second man, she knew that he was evil and she probably wasn't going home. So these are the 2 men in the car with her. Now, as they drove out of the city, Alison's like, this is not good. Now, everybody probably knows if you know true crime, you know you never go to the second location. So if someone tries to kidnap you, you just fight with all your life to stay where you are, because you have, like, I think it's like 60% more chance of dying if they take you to another location. So Clinton stops the car on a remote street that's dark and has no street light. And once there, the men tell Alison very calmly, we are going to rape you. Clinton then asks her, are you planning on fighting back? We need to know. And Alison is like, I won't fight back. If you will release me afterwards, you can do what you like. I just want to live. And I can't even imagine being in this situation. And I think even to me, it's more cold and callous and more terrifying that they're explaining to her in words what they're going to do to her. That moment of that conversation must have been like, holy hell. Like, and then he's asking, like, are you going to plan on fight back? Like, we need to know what we're going to do from here on out. It's horrific. Now, trigger warning here for anyone who finds SA, rape, etc. Triggering. I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. So Alison is brutally sexually assaulted by both men, raped front, back, and in the most horrible way. They also tried to strangle her as they are doing it. And it comes to the point where she's in and out of consciousness because of the pain of what is being done. Now, Alison, later on, during interviews, will explain that she repeats this over and over in her head. She repeats these words. It's okay, let them rape you because you can survive this. I've got this, I can get through this, I can go home. I can go to the police, I can tell my family. My parents will always support me. He is doing this to your body, not you, because really he can never touch you. And she says this over and over in her head as she's in and out of consciousness. So at this point, they pull her out of the car and they throw her onto a pile of like glass that's in the street. And they then, while she's like laying there, she's broken, she's bloody, she's been strangled. Both men begin to have a conversation again, right around over her body. Thank you, Crystal. They say that we've both been arrested on rape charges before. One of their dads is a police officer. So they're like, we're going to have to kill her. So they decide that's what they're going to do. And Alison at this point is like, you promised if I just did this, if I didn't fight back, if I didn't do this, that you were going to let me go. So she's trying to speak, but she's been strangled for a long time. She's finding it hard to find words. So they both get on top of her one by one and they try to strangle her to death. It's not working. And at this point, she's laying there, she's in and out of consciousness. And then they start taking turns of stabbing her in the stomach. After they've finished stabbing her, she's been stabbed over 37 times. They then notice that her leg is twitching from trauma, so they realise she's still alive. At this point, they pick her up, move her to another part, like really like off the path, and they cut her throat open. Now, they slice her throat, and then that's Clinton then pushes him out the way. So then he stabs her another 16 times. He's slashing her. They've done all sorts to her. Now, despite the brutality that Alison experienced, at this point, she's still aware. She says that she can feel them doing this across her throat, and she doesn't really feel pain, but she can feel the dragging of her skin. She's aware that they're cutting her throat. She heard a wet sound as they continued to slice her, and she realised it's the sound of her flesh being sliced open. She tries to grasp what's happening, but it's unreal. And she's like, 2 hours ago I was with my friends. I was having pizza. I was just a normal person. I've never hurt anyone. I've never done anything to anyone. And now I'm dying alone, broken on the side of the road. Now, after this, the attackers stand up and they go, do you think she's dead? And the other answers, no bitch can survive that. In South Africa, Port Elizabeth. As the pair climbed into Alison's car, they drive off. Now, as they drove off, Alison is left broken amongst the dirt and broken glass. And it makes me so sad. She writes in the dirt, I love you, Mum. Sorry. She thinks, I'm dying. I'm not going to make it. So she knows the names of her attackers. So she writes, because they have, even though he's just described himself as Clinton, they have been using their real names the whole time talking to each other. Their names are Theuns and Frans. So she writes in the dirt, I love you, Mum. And then she writes the names of both her attackers. And she writes Frans and Theuns, responsible. And then she writes, I love my mum. And she says she then lays there and she tells God, like, I'm ready to die. She's in pain, she's bleeding, she doesn't know what to do. And she says she then hears weird air coming from her throat. Her throat is slashed horribly. Hey Roxy, how are you doing? I've not seen you for ages. So she then knows that the air is escaping from her throat. She's not doing well. So she then decides, she's thinking of her mum, and she says, like, tears just pour down her face. So she's actually thinking of what did I say? She's then thinking to herself of all the things her mum gave up to be her mum. Like, of all the times that her mum worked overtime, of all the times her mum made Christmas happen. And she's like, I'm not dying. I'm going to see my mum. She realised as she gets up that her head is hanging on by hardly anything. And her head continues to fall back because it's cut all here. So her head's like snapping back and she's trying to hold it forward, realising that she's going to lose her head. Thank you, Lily. Now, she tries to crawl forward, and at that moment, she's like, I just need this to be over. But she's like, I'm going to get up. I need to find someone. Now, as she stands up, holding onto her head, she realises something wet around her ankles. Now, she realises it's her intestines. Her intestines are in between her feet. So she then has to hold her head with one hand, pick up her intestines and hold them into her stomach. Now, she's like, I need to do something here. She's completely naked. She's covered in blood. She's trying to figure out how to walk. She then, this absolute amazing woman, gets her shirt off the floor and makes a sling to carry her intestines. She uses one hand to hold her shirt in place with the intestines, like a baby, like this, and another to hold her head upright. The walk to the nearest road was extremely difficult, but she manages to make it to the highway, one step at a time. And she says, as she's doing it, she says, Mum, 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 because she needs to get to her mum. Now, when she gets to the highway, it's really early in the morning. It's basically desolate. There's no one driving, and she's like, I've got all this way to the road. There's no cars. There's nothing. And every time she's telling herself, like, this is over. It's not. So she's unable to remain standing. So she decides to just lay on the road, in the middle of the road, and hope that someone sees her before they hit her. Now, as then a headlight start approaching, and as the car got closer, it slows down. It looks at her, and then it just goes round her and drives off. And she's like, oh my God, no one's going to stop. I mean, at this point, she's a naked woman, right? she's covered in blood. And someone's obviously just drove straight past her, and she's like, oh my God. I was really late tonight, Terry. I've had a really bad day. The kids are poorly. So that night, Tian Ellard, a 20-year-old vet student, a veterinarian student, an animal doctor, he was from Johannesburg, and he is vacationing in the area. And he has been driving around Port Elizabeth all night long with his friends, because he's on a break, right? He's literally on holiday, and he wants to go and see as much of Port Elizabeth as he can. And he happens to be the next person to drive past Alison, and he will become the real hero in this story, as much as, you know, as Alison is as well. Now, him and his friends stop the car, and he's a vet nurse, right? He's an animal doctor, but thank you, Kirsty, he knows what he's doing. Thank you so much. Him and his friends take off their shirts to cover Alison, cover her body, knowing that as a woman, that's the first thing they should do. He knows she's been attacked. So he covers her body so that she has some dignity. And he tells her, I am going to get you help. You're going to survive this. Just hold my hand. He covers up her throat. They're trying to stem the bleeding. He can hear the air coming from her throat. And he says he knew that she was conscious, and he knew that she was aware because she's blinking, but she can't speak. Obviously, everything in her throat is so messed up. He continues to speak to Alison and instructed her to breathe. He says, look, just breathe. Just breathe. The paramedics coming. I promise you. Help is coming. He asks her to squeeze his hand, yes or no. And she's doing this, so he knows that she's at least like coherent enough to know what he's saying. He tells her, like, do you believe me? You're not going to die. And she squeezes for yes. She's like, she knows she's done so much to get to here that she's not going to give up. The ambulance takes 45 minutes to get there. Now, it's a 15-minute drive away from the local hospital. We don't, to this day, knew why it took them at that time in the morning, 45 minutes. But the paramedics get there and they see the state of Alison, and they're like, she is not going to survive this. But they decide to take her to the hospital, and Tian refuses to leave her. He says he's going to the hospital. He says, I will come with you. He wants to make sure that she's okay. Now, this is what is just, thank you, Andrea. Like, these cases are so horrific, right? There isn't much worse that could happen to someone here. But there is always an element sometimes, thank you, Kirsty, thank you, Becky, of just divine intervention for Tian to be the one to find her. But also, after everything they had done to Alison, she had over 50 plus stab and slash wounds to her body. 50. But not one had hit an artery or a vital organ. Not one. So after all those things, her head hanging off, her intestines hanging out, not one had hit a major artery or an organ. Now, despite her intestines spilling out and being all over the ground and in the dirt and everything, she also had no infections from her injuries. A throat specialist worked on Alison in the OR, and she was transferred to ICU after that surgery. The surgeon was well versed in the site of injury and blood, but he later said, it's the worst thing I've ever seen. He said, like, I had done so many operations on throats. I've literally cut throats open myself for surgery. And he said, I cannot ever put into words the extent of the cruelty that Alison Botha went through that night. He also said he was struck by the strength in her bravery and felt that she had defied science that night by surviving. He said there must have been something up there looking out for Alison, because it was not her time. And this is someone who had literally worked in throats. Yeah, she's still alive, Shaz. When Alison's mum arrived at the hospital, she had only been out of surgery about 15 minutes, and she was so shocked that her daughter was alert as she was. And Alison could still talk, which after what they'd done to her throat, like literally after everything they'd done to her throat, she could still talk. And she just says to her mum, I want justice. I want these men caught. I want the men caught for what they did to me. At 1994. So even to this day, Alison has, I'm going to go to, this is how much of her throat she was almost decapitated. It was hanging on by, because they were rapists and monsters. It was hanging on by literally a thread at the back. This is why she had to hold her head up. So the detectives come into the hospital and they say to her, we're going to give you time to recover. and we want to interview you. And she's like, I need you to bring me books of men now. I'm going to show you who these men are. I want them caught. They could do this to another woman. She's very, very clear on the fact, like, not only do I want to speak to you, but I want to do it now. Now, Alison told detectives as much as she could about her attack. At this point, she can't, her speech is not great. She has to recover, and she has been told by the doctors to not speak, to let things recover. So she begins to communicate by pieces of paper and pen. She's just kind of writing, and that's what she's doing. She can't use her voice. They want it to heal. Now, when the evidence was presented to prosecutors, they asked Alison's doctors if the breathing tube in her throat can be removed, because they want to verbally hear her say the names. And they say this is more kind of impactful in a court case than hearing her write it. It's better for them to hear her voice. So the doctor's like, I'm not really keen on that. I don't want you to remove her breathing tube because she's healing. But Alison says, now we're removing it. If it means they're going to serve time and it means they're going to get caught, I need you to take the breathing tube out. I need to just say their names. So they take out the breathing tube. She says the men's name, and police quickly arrest them. Now, I'm going to get into a little bit into, there is a documentary on this case, yes. So I'm going to get into who these men are. So on the left here, we have Frans. Okay, so I'm going to go into Frans first. He's the one here with the hair. Okay. Now, Fran's father is a police officer. They look like something from like a film, don't they? They look like something from a film. Hello, Lulu. I didn't know you were in here. Hello. So Frans, who originally was Clinton, who was the one that first stole her car and got her, he was a 26-year-old father and husband with a criminal record that included violent attacks against women. Yeah. Despite the fact that he had been accused of rape on multiple previous occasions, he had gotten off each time with a slap on the wrist due to the fact his father was a police officer. He was raised in a Christian household. When he was in 8th grade, he set fire to a dormitory and claimed he did it because he was listening to heavy metal and he was influenced by the messages. At 13, he became involved in Satanism, and when he was intoxicated, he said his evil side became more predominant. And he said that when he had sex, all he ever wanted to do was kill people. The other man was 19-year-old Thomas Kruger. Imagine having the name like Kruger and being really evil. And he was even more of a threat to public. He grew up in an alleged and abusive household, and his father was said to be a career criminal. And most women were repulsed by him. And every time he was rejected by a woman, he wanted to hurt another woman. And he remained fixated on women who he met sexually, and this would lead him to carry out rapes. When he was arrested for Alison's case, it came out that he had horrifically raped a 9-month pregnant woman earlier that month and beaten her. Like, this man was a sicko. He is a sicko. Now, the pair of them met in an alcohol rehabilitation centre that they were forced to attend by the courts. And I always think about programmes that are kind of pushed by the courts, like drug rehabilitation, domestic abuse rehabilitation, all those things. We're just gathering loads of criminals together, and then we have things like this chance pairing of evil. So after the men drove off from attacking Not at the Moment Ray, they just keep saying the same serious condition. As the men drove off in Alison's car, they headed home to drink beer together and used the same knife. Thank you, Kirsty. They'd cut Alison open. The same knife they'd cut Alison open with, they used that same knife to spread butter onto toast as a celebration. Which to me is just due to Alison Botha. When Frans was brought in and questioned by police in regard to what happened to Alison, he assumed he was being questioned about her murder. He thought she was dead. He was absolutely stunned, and I just imagine the moment when the police are interviewing him and he's like, don't know, wasn't there. And then police are like, she says you were. And he's like, what do you mean? How can she? And police are like, she's in recovery. And he is just devastated. He at this point looks at police, and he, out of his pocket, he takes out a ring that's covered in blood that he's taken from Alison's body, thinking that she was dead, and he gives it to police. Both of the men absolutely talk to police, and they have no remorse at all. They are absolutely just devastated she survived. They say if what they told police, they said if they had not been apprehended and arrested that day, the next day they planned to look for another girl and rape her, because they'd found a 410-foot bridge they wanted to throw someone off of. So that if they hadn't been arrested, that was their plans for the next day. They'd seen this bridge, and instead of most of us who were like, wow, look at this bridge, they're like, this bridge would be great to throw a victim off of. And that's what they were going to plan to do. The next day, they wanted to rape a woman and throw her over a 410-foot bridge. On the day of Alison's attack, Frans had a barbecue at his house, and the two had been drinking beer. And Frans and his wife, who were on kind of real rocky ground due to finances and him not working, both men had decided to go out and look for a woman to kill. And they said all she had to do was be beautiful so they could rape her and have a nice car, because they were going to steal it. Now, the reason they weren't together at the time when Frans got into Alison's car is because they had got bored by this point, thought they weren't going to find someone, walked their own separate ways. And it was then that on the way home, he'd stumbled across Alison in her car and gone back and got up the other one. Now, as Alison continued to recover, she requested that she could take part. She requested herself, I want to take part in a lineup. I want to make sure that the police know this was them. I know I've got their names, but I need to see them. So she does. And her case, Alison's case, I'm going to put Alison back up because I hate these men. Alison's case was the first case in South Africa where they used a two-way mirror to do a lineup. And that was to protect her from having to see them, for them to see her back. I've been live since about 10:30. Now, they'd both altered their appearance by then, but Alison was able to pick them both out. Obviously, she knew these men from her nightmares. Now, Alison was discharged from hospital on the last day of 1994, and her mother took care of her. She was travelling backwards and forwards to the hospital every single day to have her injuries and her wounds redressed. She decides at one point that all of her physical injuries are healing, and it's time to kind of... Hang on, I'm going to sneeze. Oh, God, I'm going to sneeze. Oh, sorry, I've heard sneeze 3 times then. So she realises she's got to start to deal with her internal trauma as well, and the emotional trauma she's been through. So she says that for the first time, after she's been out of the hospital, all of that, she decides she needs to see her throat wound. She needs to take off her clothes and look at all the surgical incisions on her body. She needs to deal with the real reality of what her body looks like now. And this is one of the most saddest moments I could ever imagine. So she takes off her throat bandage to kind of reveal the place where they nearly decapitated her. And she takes off, Alison Botha, she takes off her t-shirt, and she's looking in the... And she had over 50 stab wounds. So she looks at all the surgical incisions, all the scars, and she just starts crying, and tears pour down her face. She's like, I'm 27. No one's ever going to love me like this. No one's ever going to want to be with me. I'm never going to get married. I'll never have children. Like, I'll never have anything. Look at the state of me. And she just says, like, she just feels bereft. She feels like grief, absolute grief for everything they've just taken from her. She says that she battled depression for quite some time afterwards. You can imagine, right? You can imagine, like, she says she's just so full of despair. Now, the one thing that pulls her out of this despair is she realises she needs to tell her story. She says she needs to stop allowing these attackers to take her life from her. She says she needs to let people know about resilience, about how you could heal, about how you can survive. She needs to do that. Now, we will get into the court case and everything else in a minute. I'm not going to give you half a case. Now, Theuns has returned home to the man who saved her life, to Johannesburg. Johannesburg. But before he left, he writes her a card. Thank you, Crystal. A card that she still has to this day. And it says, "You are the bravest person I have ever met." Oh, I do have a picture of him with her, only recently, actually. This is Alison with Theuns, the man that saved her life. In February, she moved into a new flat with safety as a top priority. She replaced her car, unable to face a reminder, okay, Mike, of what had happened in the previous car, in her car. And by March, she's back at work. Now, remember, she only got out of the hospital the last day of December, and she gets ready to face the trial. Now, the media had dubbed her attacker as the Ripper rapist. Okay, this will be my live today will be on YouTube tomorrow as well, so if anyone wants to catch up. Now, shortly after being taken into custody, Frans starts announcing that he's possessed by demons and in need of an exorcism. Now, no one has any sympathy for him, and no one gives a fuck what he's got inside of him. Now, on March the 23rd, 1995, they both plead guilty to 8 charges that include kidnapping, rape, and attempted murder. Now, the trial began on June the 12th of 1995. By the end of day 1, the defence lawyers withdrew his service for ethical reasons, saying, "I'm not defending these." Each day as the pair were led to and from court, Detective Melvin Humple, who had left the investigation, refused to shackle the men. Now, this is really kind of... I was late, Tartan. So he refuses to shackle the men when he's taken to court. He doesn't want any handcuffs on them. And the reason for that is he says, "I hope they would run so I could shoot them dead like dogs." So he was taking them to court every day, and they're like, "Should we not have handcuffs on?" He's like, "Nope." This is... I think it's because of the South African legal system. I don't understand it so much, but they do run through everything. Now, I think it may be because as well, they were trying to plead guilty to some things, to not some things, and I think they just kind of hear the whole thing. So he kept saying to them, "Why don't you run?" Because he just wanted to shoot them dead like dogs. He worried that one day they'd be out in society again. Now, there was also 2 other victims of these men, and I think this is one of the reasons they went through for the trial as well, because they wanted to recount the other crimes these men had committed. Now, the other 2 ladies actually testified that they had been warned not to go to the police by the men. Both women had promised to stay quiet, but had gone to the authorities once they'd been released. They'd both been raped horrifically by the pair. A third woman who had barely escaped the men, testified she'd been driving around looking for a parking spot at 12:30, 2 days before Alison was abducted, when she noticed 2 scary men watching her. As she pulled into the empty parking spot, the men quickly approached her. Now, her survival instinct kicked in quite quickly, and she locked all the doors, and they couldn't enter the car. They were trying to get in for ages, and she was like, "No," and they eventually ran off. Alison testified during the trial. She indicated she refused to allow these men to take her character. They'd already taken so much from her. And on August the 7th, 1995, both men were found guilty of all charges and sentenced to life in prison. The judge was so stricken by their lack of humanity, he actually made a massive step of saying, "You will never be released." And this doesn't really happen in South Africa. Their system's very much like ours. To get a full life tariff is major over there. And the judge says, "You'll never be released. You're inhumane, you're disgusting, and you don't even care what you've done here." Now, hang on one second. It's the Alison Botha case. I've done it a couple of times before. Now, Alison ended up getting married and had 2 sons. Now, this is absolutely amazing, because when it was later in the court case, it came out that one of their statements in the police had said, "We didn't just want to kill her, we wanted to destroy her reproductive organs." They had gone out of their way to rape her so horrifically and aim a lot of stab wounds at that part of her body because they wanted... What have you seen me on, Bex? People keep saying I'm on something, I don't know what I'm on. They had tried, and she never thought she'd get pregnant. And this is one of the reasons she kept grieving, because she thought she'd never get to have children, but she went on to have 2 sons. She published a book, which is a great read. It's one of the best books I've ever written. It's called I Have a Life. There was a documentary that came out, a really good documentary actually, which was simply named Alison, which everyone who watches it says it's a triumph of human spirit, of resilience. It shows that, like, you know, so many people go through stuff in life, all of us, right? And we kind of feel like, poor me, like I'm having a really hard time. Like, I've had one of those days today where I'm just like, I feel like absolute shit. But then we look at someone like Alison and we think at any single time she could have just laid down and died. At any time she could have just said, like, oh my God, poor me, I can't do this. She had, her head was nearly decapitated. Her intestines were at her feet. And she still was like, I'm getting up. So Alison goes on, she's doing a documentary, she's done a book, she's doing so well in life. And every single person that hears her story, obviously, is absolutely inspired by her, really inspired by her. Now, Frans, this absolute cunt, I can't even describe this man. So this man, Frans, the one with the hair, he decides he wants to be in the documentary Alison. So he says the only way he will be in this documentary that no one wants him to be in is if Alison will write him a letter of apology for going to the police. So he says, look, it would be really good for you selling the documentary as if one of the perpetrators in it, but I'm going to need a letter of apology first. And they're like, for what? And they're like, because she went to the police. Now, he also then writes to Alison and says, can I have a share of the proceeds from the book and the documentary, as well as some of the earnings from your speaking engagements, because you wouldn't have any of those if it wasn't for me. And I literally was like, oh. So after that horrific night, Theuns quits as a vet and goes back to enroll in medical school to become a trauma doctor. This is really sad, but I'm really happy. He was the midwife to deliver Alison's babies, which is a real full circle moment, right? He said he was absolutely honoured not only to save her life, but to bring her children into the world. Oh God, I just think that when you're having a baby anyway, and you never thought you'd get to because of your organs, which I can't even imagine what it's like not to be able to have children. Like, I love my baby so much, but to have somebody that you trust more than anyone in the world because they saved your life, to have them stood the other end telling you it's okay. I'm gonna stop your mess now. Telling you it's okay would have just been so healing for her. Yeah, the person she trusted with her life. Oh, now 2 years after Frans admitted what he did to Alison, his father, the police officer, committed suicide. His law enforcement career had been destroyed. The shame of what his own flesh and blood was capable of was too much to handle, and he killed himself. He also felt like, which is true, his son was out there to do this to Alison because he had made sure his son had never been sentenced for the other crimes he committed. He kept making sure he just got put on little perpetrator programs and stuff like that, which had allowed him to go on to do this to Alison. So he took his own life. So he got him off before. That is what it is. Because of new changes in law, all prisoners who were sentenced to life in prison in 2004, South Africa changed their legal system, meaning that nobody could be given a full life tariff. So on Tuesday, the 4th of July 2023, after serving just 28 years, both Frans Toit and Theuns Kruger were released from prison. The decision totally disregarded Alison's pleas for them to remain behind bars and her warrant of being absolutely in fear. Now, please remember, this was a man who was demanding an apology of her, who had no fucking sympathy at all, who said, every time I have sex, I want to kill people. After a 90-day period of allowed out during the day, they were allowed free on a permanent basis. Misa, that's the company Alison has worked for motivational speaking, has indicated they are disgusted and furious at the decision to grant them parole on a case that's still considered the most horrific in South African history. Misa's CEO, Martin Cater, spoke out about the decision. He said, "We live in a country where gender-based violence is referred to as a pandemic. Police Minister Becky Sell admitted we had lost the war and nearly 1,000 women were murdered and more than 1,500 were assaulted from January to March of this year." Now, this is 2023, yeah. From between January and March, 1,000 women in South Africa were murdered. In a 3-month period in South Africa, 1,000 women and 1,500 were assaulted in that small amount. Alison's lawyer, Tanya Cohen, was also livid. She said this is not a shock or a double shock, but a shock on shock on shock. Alison had been consulted. She had written submissions in 2017 and 2020, begging them not to let him out, saying that they may come for her children. And she said, like, I've accepted what they did because the payment was for them to pay with their whole lives in prison. And now you're telling me that they're out. Alison has travelled to various countries to tell her story. Thank you guys for all the help with the gift girl. She also spoke at the Nelson Mandela University and emphasised that one's life should not be defined by the traumas. Life should not be defined by what you go through, but by the way you come back from that. She started a petition in 2023, it's done now, that tried to get, the law to change again so that perpetrators who were this violent would stay behind bars. But all I can say about Alison Botha at the end of the day is, despite everything, she is a true hero. No, they're out. Also, Minister Peter Grindelwald cancels parole for Alison Botha's attackers. This was at the end of 2025, so let me just get this open. Because they were paroled in 23 and 24, so I'm hoping he has brought them back in. It's taken ages to load, so just give me a second. Hello, Errol. The Minister of Correctional Services, Dr. Peter Gronwald, has cancelled parole for Frans, Toit and Theuns Kruger. The decision was made in accordance with the Correctional Service Act, which empowers the Minister to cancel parole. The Minister's primary consideration is the imperative of protecting and securing the community. So, from what I see here, Alison's lawyers threatened to sue the state because they never actually asked her opinion before the release. So they've took her back into custody, which is amazing. So that was updated by the South African government in 2025, right at the end. So they are back in prison. Thank God for that. I just don't know what we're supposed to do about people who show that lack of humanity. Like, no, even like after the fact of being upset what you've done or having any kind of humanity about it at all. It's disgusting. But I just think Alison is such a hero.